Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much. And obviously, thank you so much to the President Obama, because for me it's a very great pleasure host here in Villa Madama the President Obama. All Italian journalists know very well President Obama is not only a president of the United States, obviously, but for me and for my team, source of inspiration and model. And so for this reason, I particularly appreciated this opportunity of meeting. And now I speak in Italian, and ringrazio il governo degli Stati Uniti per questa occasione di incontro molto importante. Ringrazio il Presidente Obama perché credo che il dialogo di oggi confermi non soltanto una grande amicizia, una grande partnership tra i nostri due paesi, ma confermi anche e soprattutto che di fronte alle crisi che il nostro tempo pone davanti a noi, il ruolo degli Stati Uniti e dell'Europa, degli Stati Uniti e dell'Italia è quello di essere assolutamente un punto di riferimento nella difesa di valori comuni, di ideali comuni, e in questo senso la cooperazione e la partnership spaziano dalle grandi questioni internazionali alla vita di tutti i giorni. Io personalmente ho molto apprezzato e sono felice di questo, che in occasione di questa visita il Presidente Obama avrà anche un piccolo parte di tempo per visitare alcuni luoghi storici di Roma, e spero anche che l'ambasciatore John Phillips gli abbia preparato del buon cibo italiano e una buona qualità della vita in questa giornata e mezzo nel nostro paese. Tra l'altro, rispetto all'Italian Lifestyle, credo che sarà molto importante il prossimo anno l'appuntamento dell'Expo di Milano 2015 per quei valori legati al cibo, all'ambiente, all'innovazione, che fanno parte del nostro modo di concepire la vita di tutti i giorni e che saranno una bella occasione per l'Italia in tutto il mondo. Vorrei ringraziare inoltre il Presidente degli Stati Uniti per quello che ha detto ieri a Bruxelles, perché la grande sfida che lui ha lanciato alla relazione tra Stati Uniti e Unione Europea è una sfida affascinante. Io credo che l'Europa abbia bisogno di riforme, ma anche di crescita. Io credo che l'Europa debba essere il luogo nel quale la politica torna a dare speranza alle famiglie. Abbiamo parlato con il Presidente durante l'incontro e lui lo ha detto ieri nel suo speech. I nostri nonni hanno combattuto per l'Europa. Gli Stati Uniti hanno combattuto per salvare la democrazia in Europa, e in Europa si è combattuta una guerra fratricida. Io ricordo mia madre piangere davanti al muro di Berlino quando l'Europa tornava a essere una e cadevano le frontiere e cadeva quel confine. Penso che la mia generazione è quella dell'Erasmus, ma vorrei sognare per la generazione che verrà un percorso di unificazione in cui l'Europa è il luogo della stabilità, della pace e della dignità, ma anche della crescita, della lotta contro la disoccupazione giovanile, dell'investimento nella speranza e nella prosperità. E per questi motivi il messaggio che ieri il Presidente Obama ha dato è un messaggio autorevole, forte, chiaro, è un messaggio che nei prossimi mesi l'Italia cercherà di portare durante il semestre di presidenza dell'Unione Europea. Potremo farlo però, e il Presidente Obama lo sa, soltanto se l'Italia farà la sua parte, con un processo di riforme che è quello che conoscete e sul quale credo che non ci sia bisogno di spendere più parole. Noi vogliamo cambiare l'Italia perché siamo convinti che se cambiamo l'Italia diamo una mano a cambiare l'Europa e ad avere una sempre più forte relazione insieme agli Stati Uniti. Da questo punto di vista confermo gli impegni che il nostro Paese ha assunto con i partner europei e con gli Stati Uniti, in particolar modo nell'area del Mediterraneo, Il Mediterraneo è per noi il posto, il luogo che i romani chiamavano Mare Nostrum, our sea. Non credo che la traduzione sia la traduzione più adatta al Mare Nostrum latino, ma credo, e questo è molto importante, che sia nostro il dolore di quelle giovani donne che hanno dato il via alla primavera araba e che oggi hanno bisogno che la comunità internazionale non si giri indietro, che sia nostro il bisogno di libertà e di democrazia del popolo libico, delle popolazioni che stanno nel Nord Africa. E da questo punto di vista io garantisco al Presidente Obama il desiderio di lavorare insieme, in particolar modo nelle zone su cui più forte è la presenza e l'impatto dell'Italia, ma dico anche che noi vogliamo che l'Europa non consideri il Mediterraneo come una frontiera, ma come il cuore dell'azione politica e direi anche culturale e morale. E da questo punto di vista naturalmente non posso che sottolineare come la relazione tra Stati Uniti e Unione Europea, Stati Uniti e Italia continua in questo momento così delicato della crisi ucraina. A Bruxelles abbiamo riunito qualche giorno fa su impulso e stimolo del Presidente Obama il G7, ci siamo cioè confrontati sulle prospettive legate alla crisi in Ucraina, abbiamo condiviso la dura e forte protesta per le scelte contro il diritto internazionale che sono state compiute dalla Russia e abbiamo contestualmente dato un messaggio di unità, di forza e anche di grande preoccupazione, ma di grande determinazione da parte della comunità internazionale. Io personalmente ho molto apprezzato che il Presidente Obama nel suo intervento al G7 abbia sottolineato l'importanza di un approfondimento sulle questioni energetiche, perché su questo tema credo che nel semestre italiano potremo lavorare attentamente, con decisione e con determinazione e io spero anche che nel semestre italiano di Presidenza dell'Unione Europea si possa fare ulteriori passi in avanti nella già forte collaborazione economica, ma legata anche ai settori dell'innovazione, dell'information communication technology, della relazione tra i nostri valori tradizionali e, lasciatemelo dire, la grande pagina di speranza che si apre con la possibilità di creare occupazione e ricchezza dalla information communication technology. Per tutti questi motivi credo che oggi sia stato un appuntamento molto importante per il nostro governo. Naturalmente al Presidente Obama vorrei dire con grande forza che quel messaggio che ha caratterizzato the first message, yes we can, e che tutti noi ricordiamo come un messaggio di possibilità e potenzialità, oggi vale anche per noi in Italia. Perché in Italia finalmente vogliamo dire che è possibile cambiare le cose senza bisogno che ce le chieda qualcuno dall'esterno. Allora il cambiamento, le riforme strutturali che noi stiamo facendo sono le riforme che possono tornare a dare un elemento di speranza che le cose davvero cambino. La visita quindi del Presidente Obama qui è non soltanto un gesto simbolico, ma è anche un incoraggiamento del Paese amico per eccellenza e anche, lasciatelo dire, di un punto di riferimento politico al quale io assicuro l'impegno dell'Italia e dell'Europa per poter far sì che la pagina più bella nelle relazioni tra Italia e Stati Uniti sia la pagina che ancora dobbiamo scrivere. Io sono convinto che la scriveremo insieme. Presidente.
Buon pomeriggio. Thank you, Prime Minister Renzi, for your very kind words to you and the Italian people. Thanks for welcoming me today. The Prime Minister and I and his fine foreign minister spent some time in The Hague, but you can never get too much of your Italian friends, and we were able to continue the discussion today. My day started with the great honor of meeting His Holiness Pope Francis. And like people around the world, I've been incredibly moved by his compassion, his message of inclusion. I was grateful to have the opportunity to speak with him about the responsibilities that we all share to care for the least of these, the poor, the excluded. I was extremely moved by his insights about the importance of us all having a moral perspective on world problems and not simply thinking in terms of our own narrow self-interests. Of course, it's wonderful to be back in Rome, one of the truly great cities of the world. I should point out, though, that while this is our first official bilateral meeting, I already had the chance to welcome Matteo Renzi to the White House. He came a few years ago as part of a group of mayors, back when he served as the mayor of Florence, El Primo Cittadino. And I look forward to the opportunity to welcome the Prime Minister back, this time as Prime Minister. I also want to say that I had a wonderful meeting with my good friend, President Napolitano, and I think that Italy is lucky to have such an extraordinary statesman to help them guide the country through some challenging times. Italy and the United States share extraordinary bonds of history and family and culture. We're especially grateful and proud for the Italian Americans who've made enormous contributions to our country. Italy is one of our closest allies. Our partnership is one of the strongest links binding Europe and the United States together. And I've made clear throughout this trip that our partnership with Europe is the foundation of America's engagement in the world. It's a cornerstone of our security policy. So I appreciated the opportunity to consult with the Prime Minister on a wide range of issues. On a more personal level, I want to say that I've just been impressed by the energy and vision that Matteo is bringing to his position. There's a seriousness and ambition of ideas, and I think the spirit and the energy of the Italian people has the opportunity to be unleashed in a way that will be good for Italy, but it will also be good for Europe. And so it's wonderful to see this new generation of leadership coming to the fore. As the Prime Minister indicated, we focused on the situation in Ukraine, something I've been talking about over the last 3 days. And we continue to see international unity in the face of a violation of international law and Ukraine's territorial integrity. The IMF's announcement today that it reached a preliminary agreement with Ukraine on a loan program is a major step forward. This significant package of support is going to help Ukraine stabilize its economy and meet the needs of the Ukrainian people over the long term, because it provides the prospect for true growth. It'll require some structural reforms, but it also means that Ukraine can go on a path that countries like Poland have been able to embark on and seen incredible growth over the last several years. It's also going to reinforce democratic reforms, and it should help unlock some $27 billion in international support for Ukraine. So it's a concrete signal of how the world's united with Ukraine as it makes tough choices at an incredibly difficult time. And Ukraine's leaders can show considerable courage and foresight by making the reforms that will help them grow their economy, leave behind the corruption of the past. And today I want to call on the United States Congress to make sure that the United States does its part with an economic assistance package that helps support the Ukrainian people as they move forward. As NATO allies, the United States and Italy are going to uphold our solemn obligation to the security of our allies. As G7 partners, our decision to move ahead with our summit in Brussels without Russia is an example, a signal of Russia's growing isolation. The sanctions that the United States and the European Union have imposed will continue to grow if Russia doesn't change course. But as I said yesterday in Brussels, we are continually hopeful that Russia walks through the door of diplomacy and works with all of us to try to resolve this issue in a peaceful way. And we will continue to coordinate closely with Italy and our other European partners throughout this crisis. I thanked the Prime Minister as well as President Napolitano for Italy's commitment to NATO. Italian forces have served admirably in Afghanistan, where Italy is one of our largest contributors to the coalition, in Kosovo, where Italians command the NATO force. I would add that Italy both commands and contributes a large number of peacekeepers to the UN force in Lebanon. And at the Nuclear Security Summit this week, we announced the complete removal of Italy's excess highly enriched uranium so it can be eliminated. And this was a critical step in our work to make sure that dangerous materials don't fall into the hands of terrorists. And it's one more example of Italian leadership across the board. We discussed the need to boost economic growth on both sides of the Atlantic so that we're creating jobs for our people, especially young people. And that's why, in addition to the kinds of steps that the Prime Minister has outlined and he plans to pursue internally, we have an opportunity also to move forward with a transatlantic trade and investment partnership that can actually boost growth and investment, not just for large but also for small and medium-sized businesses on both sides of the Atlantic. I commended Prime Minister Renzi for his efforts to make it easier for Italian companies to hire more workers and to make the Italian economy more competitive. And I know that a lot more remains to be done. There are going to be tough choices, but as Italy moves forward and makes the hard decisions, the United States will continue to stand with you. Finally, we discussed some broader global issues. Italy played a critical role in the NATO air campaign to protect the Libyan people 3 years ago. We're now going to be working together to make sure that they can develop the security forces that can restore order to Libya and make sure that they have a government that is actually serving the Libyan people. The entire world appreciates the vital role that Italy will play in the international effort to destroy Syria's chemical weapons. It's an Italian port where chemicals from Syria's stockpiles will be unloaded and transferred to U.S. ships for elimination. And this is another example of how we work together, not just for ourselves, but for the world. And we are looking forward to being back in Italy, in Milan, hosting the world, or being part of the World Exposition next year that Italy is hosting. I'm proud to announce today that the United States will participate in the Expo, and together with our partners, we're going to put together an outstanding USA pavilion that showcases American innovation to improve agriculture and nutrition and the health of people around the globe. I know the Milan Expo is going to engage and educate the world as only Italy can, and I will tell you that I already have some volunteers from my staff who want to go and really make sure that the Expo goes smoothly. I suspect that some restaurants and shopping may somewhere be in their agenda. So, Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for your friendship and your leadership. I'm confident that together we can build on the progress that we've already made, and I'm even more confident that the bonds between our two nations will continue to grow, rooted in the enduring friendship between our two peoples. So, molte grazie.
Grazie. Thank you so much, Mr. President. Thank you so much also for the shopping and the food is absolutely important for our economy. So, 4 questions, okay? Before America. Ok, TG1, so che c'è il TG1, bene?
Buonasera, funziona? Sì, buonasera, good afternoon. Presidente Renzi, anche poco fa lei ha detto che cerca di ottenere, si impegna per una nuova Europa che dia meno spazio all'austerità e più alla crescita, meno alla burocrazia, più alla vicinanza con i cittadini. Esiste un modello americano da seguire su questo piano, chiede agli Stati Uniti di sostenere questo suo sforzo. And to President Obama, I would like to ask, are you going to share and support this effort by Italy to change, to modify the European policies in the economic field? And what kind of Europe would you like to see for a better cooperation in the economic field and also in the defense field, which you mentioned yesterday? Thank you.
Il primo sforzo dell'Italia è cambiare l'Italia. L'Italia non ha alibi. L'Italia non deve pensare che i propri problemi e le proprie opportunità possano arrivare da fuori, dall'Europa o dagli Stati Uniti. Noi dobbiamo cambiare noi stessi. Noi siamo un grande paese che può cambiare se stesso eliminando il peso di una burocrazia opprimente, riducendo i costi e i posti della politica, avendo il coraggio di semplificare il mercato del lavoro, dicendo agli investitori internazionali: questo è un bellissimo luogo dove far crescere le idee e anche il business. Per questo motivo agli italiani e ai nostri concittadini io dico: non cerchiamo scuse fuori da noi dobbiamo cambiare noi stessi. Poi certo, se abbiamo la credibilità per cambiare noi stessi, dobbiamo dire che l'Europa ha bisogno di più attenzione sui temi della crescita e meno attenzione sui temi della burocrazia. Questa è una mia personale opinione che ho condiviso discutendo con Angela Merkel, con François Hollande, con David Cameron e che discuteremo nel prossimo semestre. Possono essere gli Stati Uniti un modello? Certo. Gli Stati Uniti in questi anni hanno, con la leadership del Presidente Obama, scelto un percorso ambizioso nel ricostruire l'economia del proprio Paese. Rebuilding America. È stato un messaggio che noi abbiamo ricevuto. Noi abbiamo scelto di chiamare Jobs Act, con lo stesso acronimo che è stato utilizzato negli Stati Uniti, un percorso per restituire spazio e credibilità per i giovani che oggi sono disoccupati, dare un'opportunità, dare un'occasione agli imprenditori. Quindi certo, gli Stati Uniti sono, con tutte le differenze, per molti aspetti un modello. Quello però che per me è fondamentale è che l'Italia faccia il proprio compito, che è quello di dare finalmente corpo alle riforme strutturali che stiamo aspettando da 20 anni. E su questo si giocherà il nostro governo e la nostra credibilità nei prossimi 4 anni. Noi vogliamo cambiare noi stessi. Naturalmente lo facciamo in un mondo globale interconnesso in cui sappiamo che l'Europa deve pensare un po' di più al futuro e un po' meno al passato e che in questo senso l'amicizia e la collaborazione e la partnership con gli Stati Uniti costituiscono un punto di riferimento irrinunciabile.
Well, before I talk about the future, let me just talk about the recent past, because I think that Europe has taken some important steps and they deserve credit. As recently as a year and a half, 2 years ago, we were very worried about the euro spinning out of control. There were enormous challenges across the board. I think because of strong coordination within the Eurozone, because of some smart actions by the European Central Bank, the financial situation has stabilized. I also think that there were countries that were under enormous market pressure. Borrowing rates were skyrocketing, and because of some tough decisions, you've seen those, the ability of countries to borrow in the international markets stabilizing. All that was necessary and it was important. And it could not have happened had it not been for a coordinated response among a lot of European leaders. We've also seen some movement towards banking union, which I think is helpful. And there are some other multilateral reforms that are taking place that we have encouraged. Now, having said that, what is also true is that Europe's growth is still very slow, and its unemployment rate is still very high. And nobody knows that better than Prime Minister Renzi. That's part of his mission, is to reinvigorate the Italian economy. Each country is going to have a different set of issues that it's going to have to address, because each country has both strengths and weaknesses in their economy. And I think that Prime Minister Renzi has identified some of the structural reforms that Italy needs to engage in order for it to be more competitive and more successful. And I'm confident that he's going to be able to move Italy forward, in part because Italy is ready to move forward. As far as Europe as a whole, I do think that the old debate about growth versus austerity is a sterile debate. I think you need to have your public finances in order, but you also have to grow. And the more you grow, the easier it is to get your public finances in order. There are different capacities within Europe. And I've said before, and I will repeat again, that those countries that have substantial surpluses have more room to help boost European-wide demand, and that in turn will help countries that are still in deficit. That will lift Europe as a whole, and that means that everybody's growing. And so, in my conversations with President Barroso and Van Rompuy yesterday at the European Union, I encouraged them to continue to identify ways in which countries with surpluses can do more to boost demand while still being prudent about their public finances. The last point I guess I would make is in terms of the United States and how we can be helpful. Part of it is us making sure that we're taking care of our own issues. It's not as if we don't have a lot of work to do ourselves. We've grown faster than Europe, and I think we recovered in part because we took some smart steps. But we also have some fundamental problems that many advanced nations face, and that in fact I discussed with His Holiness Pope Francis this morning, and that is an increasing tendency in the world economy for those who benefit from globalization and technology to do better than ever before, those at the top, those at the bottom or in the middle having more and more problems, in part because perhaps their jobs have been rendered obsolete, in part because it's very difficult to see wages increase. Companies feel as if they can always move if labor makes too great a demand on wage increases or salary increases. And so all of us are seeing some structural problems in this new economy. And that means we've got to redouble our efforts to educate our young people, to make sure that we have the capacity to provide skills to our workers. If they lose their jobs, they can transition quickly, that we have a strong baseline of social support for people if they end up transitioning out of jobs, that we're paying more attention to opening up opportunity for people who've been locked out, particularly young people, because as I mentioned to the Prime Minister, one of the tragedies of high youth unemployment is that when young people don't have a strong attachment to the labor market early, that can continue for the rest of their careers. And they never fully recoup what's lost in terms of their potential earnings and their ability to advance in the labor market. And so we can't afford to have years and years of young people who are drifting, working part-time, not able to develop the kinds of careers and skills that will allow them to succeed in the future. That has to be a priority, and I know Prime Minister Renzi is focused on it. Jim Acosta, CNN.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Grazie, Mr. Prime Minister. Mr. President, in your meeting with His Holiness Pope Francis, did he register any objections with you about the contraception coverage mandate in the Affordable Care Act or your efforts to advance the rights of gays and lesbians in the United States that worry so many Catholics, and what were his concerns? And on Russia, with reports of troops building on the Ukrainian border, by taking the military option off the table, are you sending a signal to Vladimir Putin that other parts of Ukraine are his for the taking? And why not send multinational peacekeepers to the Ukrainian border as a deterrent? And to you, Mr. Prime Minister, the President said yesterday that the U.S. would defend any NATO ally. Are you making that same commitment when it comes to Russia?
That's a lot of questions there, Jim. Did the Italian journalists, by the way, do this? These sort of 5-part questions? Same thing? No
comment.
Can't
say about Italian journalism.
All right, let me try to remember this. In terms of the meeting with His Holiness Pope Francis, we had a wide-ranging discussion. I would say that the largest bulk of the time was discussing two central concerns of his. One is the issues of the poor, the marginalized, those without opportunity and growing inequality. Those of us as politicians have the task of trying to come up with policies to address issues. But His Holiness has the capacity to open people's eyes and make sure they're seeing that this is an issue. And he's discussed in the past, I think, the dangers of indifference or cynicism when it comes to our ability to reach out to those less fortunate or those locked out of opportunity. And then we spent a lot of time talking about the challenges of conflict and how elusive peace is around the world. There was some specific focus on the Middle East, where His Holiness has a deep interest in the Israeli-Palestinian issue, but also what's happening in Syria, what's happening in Lebanon, and the potential persecution of Christians. And I reaffirmed that it is central to U.S. foreign policy that we protect the interests of religious minorities around the world. But we also touched on regions like Latin America, where there's been tremendous progress in many countries, but there's been less progress in others. I think what the theme that stitched our conversation together was a belief that in politics and in life, the quality of empathy, the ability to stand in somebody else's shoes and to care for someone even if they don't look like you or talk like you or share your philosophy, that's critical. It's the lack of empathy that makes it very easy for us to plunge into wars. It's the lack of empathy that allows us to ignore the homeless on the streets. And obviously, central to my Christian faith is a belief in treating others as I'd have them treat me. And what's, I think, created so much love and excitement for His Holiness has been that he seems to live this and shows that joy continuously. In terms of domestic issues, the two issues that we touched on, other than the fact that I invited and urged him to come visit the United States, telling him that people would be overjoyed to see him, was immigration reform. And, as someone who came from Latin America, I think he was very mindful of the plight of so many immigrants who are wonderful people working hard, making contributions. Many of their children are U.S. citizens, and yet they still live in the shadows, in many cases have been deported and are separated from families. I described to him how I felt that there was still an opportunity for us to make this right and get a law passed. And he actually did not touch in detail on the Affordable Care Act. In my meeting with the Secretary of State, Cardinal Pentolin, we discussed briefly the issue of making sure that that conscience and religious freedom was observed in the context of applying the law. And I explained to him that most religious organizations are entirely exempt. Religiously affiliated hospitals or universities or NGOs simply have to attest that they have a religious objection, in which case they are not required to provide contraception, although the employees of theirs who choose are able to obtain it through the insurance company. And I pledge to continue to dialogue with the U.S. Conference of Bishops to make sure that we can strike the right balance, making sure that not only everybody has health care, but families and women in particular are able to enjoy the kind of health care coverage that the ACA offers, but that religious freedom is still observed. There was a third question? What was that? The third? Okay, that's right, Russia. Okay, I remember. I think that I've been very clear in saying that we are going to do everything we can to support Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. But I think that it's also important for us not to promise and then not be able to deliver. There are ways for us to hopefully influence Russian decision-making, and one of the most important things that we can do on that front is ensure that the Ukrainian government is stable, that its finances are stable, and that elections go forward as currently scheduled so that we have a legitimate, strong, representative, inclusive government with an economic program that it is implementing and carrying out. And all those things are in place, but we're going to have to put a lot of resources and a lot of effort, not just the United States, but Europe as well. I've been very impressed with Prime Minister Yatsenyuk and his current efforts. The decision to go forward with an IMF program with a lot of resources is going to require a lot of courage. But keep in mind that part of what prompted the original protests that led to the previous president leaving was an objection about the same corrupt practices, an economy that was completely inefficient, that had led to a situation in which Poland's GDP had skyrocketed and the Ukrainians had plummeted when they started off at the same place just several years ago. I think the Prime Minister understands that. I think the Ukrainian people understand that. It'll require some tough decisions, but, Prime Minister Renzi is also making tough decisions. We've had to make some tough decisions. That's the nature of political leadership, and I think that's what the Ukrainian people are seeking, is a better future, even if it requires some short-term changes to business as usual.
The question for me is more clear, and the answer is easy. Yes. Yes, because I think the crisis in Ukraine is a very bad situation. But the reaction of European Union and the United States is a reaction with one voice, not different ways, one voice. For this reason, I think the statement of G7 in Brussels and the decisions for the future are decisions very important for Italy, and we are absolutely committed in this direction. Ansa.
Buonasera, confesso subito che farò anch'io più di una domanda.
No.
Rapida. Presidente Obama, lei ha espresso preoccupazione per i tagli alla difesa all'interno dei paesi NATO, dicendo che la libertà non è gratis. Ecco, però l'Europa, come lei stessa ha ricordato, sta uscendo da una dura crisi che ancora impone una serie di tagli in diversi settori, compresa la difesa. In Italia proprio in questi giorni c'è un dibattito su una possibile riduzione delle commissioni degli F-35. Come si concilia secondo lei la necessità di mettere i nodi nei conti con quella di non toccare la spesa militare? Volevo anche chiederle se ha parlato con il Premier del suo pacchetto di riforme strutturali e se ritiene che sia la ricetta giusta per rilanciare il Paese, e al Premier volevo chiedere se avete avuto modo di affrontare la questione dei marò nel corso del vostro incontro. Grazie.
When it comes to defense spending, all of us have to make sure that our defense forces are efficient, effective, that for every dollar or lira that we're spending, that we're getting the most defense for our money. And so in the United States, we've reduced our defense spending as we've brought two wars to a close. There's a natural transition. The kinds of spending increases that we had seen were unsustainable. And I recognize that in Europe, and I discussed this with both Prime Minister Renzi as well as President Napolitano, there are opportunities for greater efficiencies, not only within a country's own defenses, but also by collaborating between European countries so that you don't have too much duplication and excess capacity. And in fact, Secretary General Rasmussen has repeatedly put forward plans for building NATO defense capacity in ways that reduce duplication and ensure that we are getting the most for our money. But having said that, there is a certain irreducible commitment that countries have to make if they're serious about NATO and the defense alliance. And I've been very realistic, I think, with my European partners. We, the United States, obviously have the largest military in the world, and we recognize we have some extraordinary responsibilities. We don't expect every country to duplicate exactly what we do. We have responsibilities in the Middle East. We have responsibilities in Asia, Latin America. We welcome those responsibilities, and we understand that that is a particular role that we play. But we're also a partnership in NATO. And we can't have a situation in which the United States is consistently spending over 3% of our GDP on defense, much of that focused on Europe, potentially more if we end up having ongoing crises within Europe, and Europe is spending, let's say, 1%. The gap becomes too large. Obviously, small countries will still be having a lot less capacity than us, but proportionally to their GDP, we need to make sure that everybody is doing their fair share. That's not just for our benefit, it's also because Europe's going to have its own unique defense needs. Prime Minister Renzi spoke about the Mediterranean. Conceivably, Italy is going to develop more and more specialized capacity in addressing particular challenges in North Africa or in other parts of the Mediterranean. Well, that's going to require some resources in order to do that. So this is not something that's going to have to happen overnight, but there has to be a trajectory that recognizes the need for everybody pitching in. Because, as I said yesterday, we cannot take our freedom for granted.
Sì, abbiamo parlato della vicenda dei due Marò che sono illegalmente trattenuti in India. Io ho ringraziato gli Stati Uniti, il governo degli Stati Uniti per il supporto che ci hanno dato in questa fase di discussione internazionale e ho chiesto al Presidente Obama di poter contare su un ulteriore appoggio perché la questione sia sempre più affrontata su scala internazionale. Però non sarei onesto con voi se non spendessi anch'io una parola rispetto alle questioni che lei ha posto al Presidente Obama ma anche al governo italiano. Io condivido molto ciò che dice il Presidente Obama quando afferma che la libertà non può essere considerata gratis e noi non possiamo lamentarci del dolore del mondo se non siamo disponibili a farcene carico, se non siamo disponibili a affrontare in un'alleanza di democrazia e libertà, di valori e di ideali comuni, una quota parte di responsabilità. Per questi motivi l'Italia ha sempre fatto la sua parte nel corso degli anni, consapevole delle proprie forze, dei propri numeri, ma con grande dedizione, con grande impegno, e io ringrazio il Presidente Obama per aver riconosciuto una volta di più la forte partnership tra i nostri paesi. Quando gli italiani sono stati chiamati a responsabilità hanno sempre cercato di farlo con il massimo dell'impegno e dell'onore, e penso che noi dobbiamo nel corso dei prossimi anni insistere su questo concetto che il Presidente vi ha adesso espresso della specializzazione, in particolar modo in alcune aree. Noi non possiamo sempre costantemente affermare che l'Unione Europea deve giocare un ruolo e poi ritirarsi indietro, tanto ci sono gli Stati Uniti che intervengono in ultima battuta. Non è giusto, siamo partner, dobbiamo lavorare insieme. Io sono d'accordo con il Presidente Obama. Le vicende legate alla, ha detto bene il Presidente, all'efficienza, all'efficientamento, diciamo noi in burocratese, nel linguaggio burocratico italiano, dei costi della pubblica amministrazione e della difesa sono sotto gli occhi di tutti. Noi, nel rispetto della collaborazione e cooperazione con i nostri partner, provvederemo a verificare i nostri budget per renderli in grado di intervenire in tutto il mondo e contemporaneamente in grado di evitare gli sprechi che in alcuni settori, ahimè, noi abbiamo avuto.
Juliana Goldman, you get the last word.
Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister. Mr. President, I just want to follow up on Jim's question on your meeting with the Pope today. Do you think some of the schisms that he referenced on social issues would stand in the way of you and Pope Francis collaborating or forming a strategic alliance to tackle income inequality? And then on Russia, you've said that there are costs of further sanctions on the global that would affect the global economy. How would U.S. companies with interests in Russia and Americans as a whole feel those costs? And Mr. Prime Minister, President Obama on this trip has said that Europeans need to step up when it comes to confronting Russia and also supporting Ukraine. But given the fragile recovery here in Italy, can Italy really step up, or does it need to step back? And are you concerned that Congress's failure to approve additional IMF reforms would prevent the U.S. from stepping up enough? Thank you.
First of all, I just want to make clear, maybe it wasn't clear from my answer to Jim, that we actually didn't talk a whole lot about social schisms in my conversations with His Holiness. In fact, that really was not a topic of conversation. I think His Holiness and the Vatican have been clear about their position on a range of issues. Some of them I differ with. Most I heartily agree with. And, I don't think that His Holiness envisions entering into a partnership or coalition with any political figure on any issue. His job is a little more elevated. We're down in the ground dealing with the often profane, and he's dealing with higher powers. I do think that there is a potential convergence between what policymakers need to be thinking about and what he's talking about. I think he's shining a spotlight on an area that's going to be of increasing concern, and that is reduced opportunities for more and more people, particularly young people, who, by the way, have more and more access to seeing what's out there and what's possible, because they have access to the internet or they have access to other media, and they see the inequality and they see themselves being locked out in ways that weren't true before, and that's true internationally, not just within countries. And so for him to say that we need to think about this, we need to focus on this, we need to come up with policies that provide a good education for every child and good nutrition for every child and decent shelter and opportunity and jobs. He's not going to get into the details of it, but he reminds us of what our moral and ethical obligations are. It happens also to be good economics and good national security policy. Countries are more stable. They're going to grow faster when everybody has a chance, not just when a few have a chance. So he's hopefully creating an environment in which those of us who care about this are able to talk about it more effectively. And we are in many ways following not just his lead, but the teachings of Jesus Christ and other religions that care deeply about the least of these. With respect to Russia, what was your question? You guys asked me too many questions. I can't remember them all. Oh, U.S. companies. Well, this probably converges with the question you asked Prime Minister Renzi. We have not yet taken steps that would target entire sectors of the Russian economy, like finance or military sales or energy. But what we are doing, in consultation with our allies, is to work through each of those sectors and look at what kinds of sanctions potentially could have a powerful impact. None of them, to have a powerful impact on Russia, are going to have zero impact on us because Russia is part of the world economy. This is part of the reason why I said yesterday we're not looking at a possible return to the Cold War. The economies have changed, the politics have changed. Russia's not leading an ideological bloc that's opposed to the world economy. Gazprom is listed on world markets, and everybody owns a piece of everything. So there will be some impact. Hopefully we can design sanctions that minimize the impact on U.S. companies or Italian companies and maximize the impact on the narrow set of interests in Russia that help drive the decisions that they're making. But those are highly technical. That's the work that's being done right now. Even better, hopefully we don't have to use them because Russia decides that they should take the wiser course and accept the offer of the international community and the Ukrainian government to try to resolve this in a peaceful and lawful way.
We reaffirm our commitment very clear, and we stay strong and very determined with our partners, and so there are values in our country. The first value is not money. The first value is the ideal of democracy and freedom. Ma mi faccia dire in italiano però un concetto per gli italiani. I'm sorry, because your question is for American journalists, and I'm sorry because I have a little concept. This is the last, I think. L'economia italiana non è messa nelle condizioni di essere in crisi e di essere in una situazione per la quale non può affrontare la crisi ucraina. Questo è un passaggio molto importante che io vorrei che fosse chiaro ai nostri amici della stampa italiana. Noi possiamo affrontare anche una eventuale crisi energetica. Abbiamo le risorse per farlo e abbiamo, ricordiamocelo sempre, sì un grande debito pubblico, ma un risparmio privato che è 4 volte il debito pubblico. Abbiamo, risparmio pubblico e privato, abbiamo un patrimonio, più correttamente, che è 4 volte il debito pubblico. Abbiamo un avanzo primario negli ultimi anni costante tranne il 2009 e abbiamo dei numeri di crescita economica che non ci rendono la Cenerentola dell'Europa e delle istituzioni internazionali. usciamo da questa subalternità culturale per cui sembra che la nostra posizione debba essere dettata da un mero calcolo e interesse di natura economica. I nostri amici americani, quando durante la Seconda Guerra Mondiale sono venuti a combattere in questo paese, non l'hanno fatto per un conto economico, non l'hanno fatto per un calcolo economico. Quando io da sindaco di Firenze mi sono recato tutti gli anni al cimitero dei Falciani, che è il cimitero forse uno dei luoghi più imponenti nel suo silenzio, dove ci sono migliaia di ragazzi che erano molto più giovani di me e che hanno perso, migliaia di ragazzi americani, che hanno perso la vita per difendere i valori europei e del nostro paese che magari non avevano mai conosciuto prima, anzi sicuramente, io penso che lì non ci sia un costo economico. E vorrei invitare i nostri amici della stampa italiana a riconoscere che i dati che noi abbiamo di fronte a noi nella vicenda ucraina e nella crisi con la Russia non sono ispirati da una valutazione di natura economica. E per questi motivi credo che la relazione, il rapporto, l'amicizia con gli Stati Uniti d'America ha sicuramente importanti implicazioni di natura commerciale. Dovremo lavorare nel semestre europeo perché si arrivi all'accordo, speriamo di farcela, eventualmente sarà nel 2015 se non ce la faremo nel semestre italiano sul trade agreement con gli Stati Uniti. Però quello che voglio dire è che il motivo per il quale ringrazio il Presidente Obama è che ci sono dei valori che condividiamo. Tra qualche istante il Presidente Obama andrà in visita privata in alcuni luoghi belli di Roma, in alcuni luoghi straordinari di Roma. Quei luoghi belli e straordinari di Roma non sono, se fossero stati realizzati oggi avrebbero probabilmente visto degli autorevoli burocrati che avrebbero detto no, stiamo spendendo troppo, non stiamo realizzando le cose giuste. Sono dei luoghi di bellezza, di grande impatto, di grande importanza, sono dei luoghi che fanno del nostro paese non una superpotenza economica, ma una superpotenza culturale. Noi vogliamo, con lo stesso impegno con il quale difendiamo il nostro passato, costruire il nostro futuro insieme ai nostri alleati e quindi guardare con un minimo più di coraggio, di entusiasmo e anche, lasciatemelo dire, di ambizione, perché forse l'Italia deve iniziare a fare sogni un pochino più grandi di quelli che ha fatto fino ad oggi. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much for your presence here. Grazie.